in the world, I would rather be with a kind of, a tiny, true-hearted publisher than be part of the machine of literature and things these days. I kind of got very tired of that. And we'll talk about that a bit later on, because there's actually an intro to this book where I kind of say where I've been for 10 years. So these poems are drawn on the last 10 years. So it's kind of selected new poems from the last 10 years. And I've picked kind of 2 sets to share with you this evening. So I'm going to read for about 15 minutes now. Then we'll have our Q&A, and then there'll be with my questions with Peter. Then I'll read a little bit more, and then it's kind of open questions. You can ask me anything you like, kind of thing there. So I'd like to begin with the opening poem from the book. And they often say that poetry is a conversation, that poetry is a conversation with all the kind of poets that you've read before, or a poet that that you're in love with. And sorry, something's catching my throat. And I found myself in some very funny positions in my kind of writing career. So one day I was at a particular place, and somebody handed me a first edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. Now, I don't know if you know what one of those is worth. But they literally just put it in my hand and said, here, you might enjoy this. And I Googled how much it was worth later on. It was worth £330,000. And but that wasn't the valuable thing to me. It was the fact it was signed by Walt Whitman, had an inscription inside it. And those of you who kind of know me, through books and so on, will know that I have a very strong relationship to Whitman, even having done a kind of an introductory edit to Leaves of Grass and recorded that as an audio. And the reason the book is called So is that we start so many sentences with the word so. So it struck me that a book can be, well, it came out in 1855, and yet you open this book and the writer is speaking to you as it right now in this moment. And that's the power of books more than anything else. That, even a little book like this that could fall through the cracks, not be seen for 100 years, but might be in a library somewhere, and you pick it up and there is life and there is communication and soul to soul. So this is called emissary, because I see poetry and books as being emissaries. That my voice might reach you across the years through the pages of this book. That I might share with you a message of having loved this world and the life from which it all rises up. That you may hold this book in your hand, lift your own eyes, your own heart anew, as you step out this day to see the tree before it is named as tree, to meet a stranger before the mind judges and decides on stranger, that my life might meet your life and your life recognize itself in all things and in all people. Love before it is named as love, across time, across space, by virtue of love's infinity. And I put a recording of a poem up on social media today called 9 Allegories of Power. And this was actually one of the very first poems written for So. After I'd finished the last poetry book, which was Full Blood, this one, and then the book that came before that, Recital, they came out sort of 3 years apart. And these are incredibly complex. They're not complicated to read in any way, but one of my kind of literary specialties is as a structuralist. And so there's lots of kind of interconnecting light motifs and themes between things. And when I was working on Full Blood, not this office, but I rented an office in a building just across the way, and I put sort of lining wallpaper on the walls. And I actually had like kind of nested loops and lines of things, of connecting ideas and things. And I built the book out of kind of these kind of crazy notes around the wall. So it looked like a sort of mad professor's kind of studio. And when it came to sort of starting another book, I didn't feel like doing that again. I wanted to kind of create something that was more akin to an art gallery, where you just kind of, there's a collection that's been curated, but each piece genuinely stands kind of on its own in a way, or mostly. There is one sequence in the book, and we're going to hear that in the second reading. So this is called 9 Allegories of Power, and it's just a series of almost like, not quite haikus, just, you know, couplets on different elements of what is powerful in the world, in truth. And for the eagle-eared amongst you, are there actually 9? 9 Allegories of Power. A thread around which gold and silver abound in glory. The fingers which thread the needle, a needle passing through cloth. To live one ordinary day and know what it is to have lived that day. Your sincerest promise held against you, a knife to your gut or your deepest wish. The what if asked in a room full of certainties. We live by the stories we tell ourselves. The space between the words in this poem, or the close distance between 2 pages of a book. The accumulation of seconds in which empires are born, gather their height, and become broken statues and friezes in museums far away. A whistle in the darkness, and I know there is hope. Yes, it is dark tonight, no stars, no moon. A whistle in the darkness, I have power over night. Finally, love. When it washes away the certainties of a lifetime, when it breathes back more than the world has taken out of your sweet body. The difference between 0 and 1. A 0 placed on paper meaning nothing until the account is reckoned. An artist that I greatly love is René Magritte. And we were very lucky a number of years ago to have a very, very beautiful collection of Magritte's paintings exhibit at Liverpool. I think it was the biggest pulling together of Magritte paintings ever. And like Hemingway, I really feel impacted by visual art and feel that visual art can teach the writer a great deal. Hemingway famously said that he used to visit this particular painting every day for about 18 months, and it taught him how to write. It taught him how to layer within his writing and use image. And I've kind of looked at Magritte a lot. And we often think of Magritte as being kind of surrealist, but actually I find him to be more hyperreal in a way. And he has certain things that he does, like he will take something from the outside and bring it inside and make it large in the middle of the room, like a gigantic rose. Or he'll take something from the inside and put it outside. And then there'll also be things that you go through one door, which leads you to another, to another, to another. So this poem is a surrealist painting in a way. Perspective. In the heart of the leaf, the tree. In the heart of the tree, the forest. In the heart of the forest, a silence, not silence. In the heart of the silence, a door. In the room behind the door, a woman and a man. In the heart of the woman, a girl. In the heart of the man, a boy. We must look after the children, they say over dinner. One funny thing, and I think Peter and I are going to talk about this in a moment or two, is that a number of the poems in So have got GPS coordinates because they're about real places and were actually written in those places. So what I thought would be a nice touch. Originally, the entire book was going to have GPS coordinates, but the way that we selected the poems, some of them did and some of them didn't. So I'd say it's probably half have got GPS coordinates. And something that would be deeply amusing to me or my ghost after I'm gone is if if at some point somebody was to kind of like go and read these poems in the places that they were actually kind of about and written. So there's a place in northern India called Morley Jagran, and it's apparently one of the most dangerous places imaginable. You die if you walk into this place. Gangs and, muggers and this, that, the other. And I didn't know this. I was just told, really don't go there. Nobody said anything to me. And if you tell somebody like me that you can't do something, somehow you find yourself there. That's that rebellious aspect of the spirit in a way. And I'm forever kind of getting in trouble in this life and the other life as a sort of meditation teacher and so on. And I'm very grateful that I was made that way, quite honestly. More power to our rebelliousness. So Morley Jagran, and should you need the coordinates, this is 30 degrees, 42 minutes, 45 seconds north by 76 degrees, 49 minutes, 39 seconds east. Slum town between two cities, where trains get no rest at night, where the first star of evening rises to ask for your wishes, where cranes lift dinosaur necks, moving steel and pipes and gravel, Chandigarh and Panchkula's litter bin, tinseled by foil snack packets and the snow of polystyrene thali plates, where the railway sidings call you to go the distance into morning fog, to find boys all with blackest hair playing cricket with sticks and stones. The world is full of beggars, poor ones reciting constant pleas, rich ones with city towers of gold. Turn down the sound on the television. They all make the same face while putting their hand out. Morley can't look you in the eye without wanting a piece of you. Don't go there, you'll be killed, I'm told. Allahu Akbar sings out from the mosque away down the railway line. Muslim, Hindu, and Sikh mouth along. Morley Jagran, where the chai makers and bangle sellers live, heading out to Sector 17 on endless bicycles in dust and highway noise. Allahu Akbar, Morley Jagran, meet my eyes with your eyes. Meet me only with yourself and your soul. Most everything else in this world is not worth a damn. I see a boy with a goat on a string, a cell phone in his other hand. I see a girl impossibly clean and bright, dressed to marry the day. An hour moves differently here. It's a syrup, clear and thick. Allahu Akbar. Let's stop there for our chat with Peter. there was 3 more in that section supposed to be, but I always choose far too much material. We'll see what more we can fit in there, you know. Also, part of the rebelliousness is, and I, you know, if you, those of you who know me again, know that I'm of no religion, but of the religion of the heart, as it were, love. And but I recognize the truth that hides underneath all religions. If only people would practice the religion of their religions. I'm not allowed to say that in in certain places. And, you know, saying words like Allahu Akbar out loud is kind of quite largely frowned upon. So it's just nice to be able to do it in places where you're not supposed to.
Thank you, John, for that wonderful, phenomenal, provocative reading. And it's great now to have a small talk with you. I think we've got about 20 minutes. And the first thing I'd like to talk about, perhaps if I scratched my editor's hat, is that the introduction was not a standard introduction with the usual blandishments, mate, was it?
No, the introduction to So is very, very different. It's a letter to you, the reader, basically. And because you may not know this, some of you will. I know that some of you will, but it's actually just a straight conversation with you, the reader, because I had said that I was never going to write any more books. After 2014, I said that was it, I'm done. And I officially retired. You know, there was kind of peace in the Guardian and so on. You know, I retired from boards that I was on, etc., etc. And I said, no more books, I'm done. Because my life had changed so much. There'd been this kind of shift of consciousness, I suppose you could call it. I don't like really talking about it too much, where if you'd have known me before, a lot of what is here, it was there kind of thing in terms of personhood. But I was very angry, kind of quite grasping at things a lot of the time. And this shift, everything changed, and I had to find a new way to be. And I found I really didn't want to be around the negativity of the literary world anymore. If I'm honest, I find it a very negative, egoic, kind of broken-hearted place with kind of people clamoring for ego attention in kind of the meanest and most backstabby and backbitey kind of ways. And that's up to them, but I just didn't want to be part of it anymore. And then at the end of 2014, I died. I actually died. And because I was really poorly. I was in the intensive care unit in a hospital in India. And my doctor said, you know, you're not going to be here tomorrow, make your peace. And I had my wife was next to me, and I spent my last night and faded away at 9 o'clock in the morning. And then without resuscitation, 5 minutes later came back. And, you know, it was the whole caboodle, the love, the light, the you know, do you want to go back? Being asked the question, the whole thing. Again, I don't like to talk about it too much, but the person who came back is not the same as the person who went away.
Well, we're Peter, glad from our selfish point of view, the literary world, we're glad you came back.
Well, the thing is, Peter is a shrewd fellow, and Peter and I go back 31 years now, Peter. And that's quite frightening, isn't it? Since I first walked into Common Word, going, well, I think I want to write and I don't know what to do. And Peter is the person who actually started me off properly and believed in me when nobody else even had an idea. Because I used to write these really odd little pieces, didn't I? And now kind of, you know, they're clear and don't have any metaphors in and things like that. And Peter knew that there would be a book hiding in the drawer, and there was. I mean, this was a kind of almost completed text nestled in a drawer with me saying, no, there's nothing in there. And Peter's like, no, I know there's something in there. Here it is.
But let us talk a little bit, perhaps, about that journey, that literary journey from the early works, where I remember you used to create these works, which were in this
Oh my
shape.
God,
Do you remember
yes.
them?
Oh, I thought you had one there. I thought you had one.
I probably have one somewhere, John, but not today. I haven't got it here. I felt they were very they were doing very important, difficult work, really, in terms of poetry. But there is a movement, maybe from where you stood there, where there was a kind of necessary complexity or in imperviousness, if you like, to some of those poems, where you had to spend a long time, a bit like Hemingway going to Magritte. You had to spend a long time to discern what was happening in those poems. To the poems that you've written now for So, which I think are very clear, very transparent, and so you just mentioned that you've decided to avoid metaphor. What was the thinking around that in terms of, and does that connect with the clarity of the poems that you have in So?
Yeah, absolutely. So at some point during, well, I knew right at the beginning, it wasn't called So at the beginning, but when I finished Full Blood, I actually just kind of continued writing and started working on another book. And about half of So comes from that period before I decided to stop. But also this transformation, as I said, was kind of taking place. And so this kind of soul-searching need for clarity and what is true in the world was very, very strong, is still strong in me. And the authentic, the need for authenticity. And because of art, because of visual art, even things like Picasso and, as I say, Magritte and some other things. And also, I have a great love of kind of early Chinese poetry, so 7th and 8th century Chinese poetry. I really liked kind of very direct communication. So I decided that there would be no metaphors and no similes in the next book. So there are no metaphors or similes anywhere in So. There is not one something is like something else, and there is not one thing that is an allusion to something.
It kind of pulls the floorboards from underneath the poet, generally, doesn't it?
It really is.
That's their go-to thing to do.
Well, that's it. That's it. And because I'm tired of poetry tricks, and I'm tired of cleverness, and I'm tired of scansion just being the only thing that makes a poem valuable, I wanted to just literally try to write down what was actually there, almost in that French modernist style, where you just say what it is, and it is what it says it is. And if you, but not in shallowness, if you put these things together and allow the space to be between them, then serving our beautiful reader, our reader is not a stupid person, and they're a person with a heart and a soul. So if they engage with that open quality within the literature of directness, the reader will know for themselves what is being communicated. Joyce does this in Ulysses. People think Ulysses is some crazy book. It's not. It's a direct emotional communication, and it's carried in the spaces rather than the cleverness of the poet. So my object was to take myself out as much as possible. No cheap poetic tricks, and just show you what is what.
Well, you see, one thing I do want to talk about, if possible, I know it's my own obsession, John. When we were gathering these poems together, I thought, that what we should call this, it was a terrible idea at the time. I didn't realize it. I accept it's a terrible idea. We should call this the subjunctive because a lot of the mood, I actually looked up what the subjunctive meant today again, but what is imagined or wished or possible is the sort of dictionary definition of the subjunctive. And there is a lot of poetry and meditation within this work about what is imagined or what is wished or what is possible as much as what is present. And one of the fascinating things that I find you doing is, again, this bending of time. I started to feel it's almost a palimpsest of time, a layering of time, different times moments, events in one kind of imagined space that creates this beautiful, evocative, moving poetry. And I just wondered if that was something that you consciously sought to do, or whether it's something that arrived in your poetry.
That's something that I began working on with Recital as a deliberate thing. So the book Recital, which I won't be reading from today, but the book Recital and Almanac, the poems are laid out as if they're across a year. But actually what I've done is the year is 50 years folded into 1 year. So it's like 50 years of my family history, but told through world events. And things kind of going on around me that are interesting to me, as well as it tracks the 13 full moons of the year as well. So there are 13 moon poems within this, because I'm absolutely, a moon lover, moon dreamer kind of guy. And so I learned to kind of fold time, just like with emissary, because that thought of when you open the book, it doesn't matter when the book is read. If the writer has done their job properly, then you are being communicated with in the here and now, as it were. And it's nothing to do with time references. It's literally to do with the directness of the communication and the openness of your heart in allowing for the reader. And so, again, to honor the reader properly, I know that we are capable of so much more than we think we are. So there is no problem in kind of having this kind of very layered, multidimensional. I like that idea of palimpsest, of things kind of laid down, written over again, written over again, and you kind of begin to see down through it. And I think but you can still do that in a very simple way.
I found some of the most moving poems were those where you conjured this folding as a time, as you call it. So that I think there was one in which you meet your father as a young man and have a meal with him, and it was just such a beautiful moment.
Oh yeah, the gathering. I can't remember what page that's on. Hang on a second.
It's page 41, 42, as your editor.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Gathering, there you go, 41. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so I didn't realize I'd done that in that poem, but yeah, so this is about my father's journey, arriving in the UK 1950-ish, and how he kind of survived, and then as a poet entering into that space, and instead of actually just talking about the space and my father in that time, I just decided to sit down and have a meal with him, because I didn't get to know him at that time. So why can't we do that? There's a lovely, I know his name is banned these days, but it's still a really good film. There's a film called The Purple Rose of Cairo by Woody Allen, and whether you forget that it's Woody Allen, just put that away, right? He's not in it anywhere. It's just before all the nonsense. And it's about this film where an actor just walks out of the screen and kind of goes off and starts living his life, and how that affects the rest of the world. That's not borrowed from that in any way, but why not? Why are these when we talk about something, why is that not actually a portal to where we are?
But what it lit within me, just to respond as a reader, was all these moments where I thought, I would have loved to have done that with my own father as a young man. I would have loved to have done that with my own mother as a young woman. I'm almost welling up with lost imagined moments, and I think that's one of the beautiful things that poets and poetry can do, to invite us into this imagined space where so many powerful things can happen emotionally that maybe feel like they ought to happen, if you know what I mean, but not in this sort of scientific linear world, but in some other world they ought to happen, so it's quite a spiritual experience in that sense.
Yeah, really. Well, the thing is, Peter, and with everybody here, all the beautiful little faces I can see, and because everybody's only that big on my screen, and it'd be really funny if I met you in real life and your head was only that big, and but but every single one of us, the past is not dead to any of us, is it? You know? So all those missed things, just like you say, Peter, all those times with your father, all those times with your mother that you didn't, well, those are alive in you. But what we can do as writers, the writer actually has control of history, you know, or history, and both of you know, or their story, and so why don't we, you know, if we're not happy with the way things are, if things didn't work out emotionally for us, why can't we just on an emotional level actually go back there and sit down and have that meal? Why can't we do that? Why don't we? Because the effect of that missing, if it is a missing, or that beautiful event, is alive in us, is acting through us, and actually forming part of our personality in this moment. So, you know, you have every right to work with that material.
And this is why I will call John Siddique the poet of the subjunctive, irrespective of what you want to be called. Because that imagining is a beautiful, wished for, possible thing that may not actually sit in this sort of, you know, this sort of reality mode that we're most often in. But coming back to that, there is this thing that another thought I had was that your poetry brings me into an awareness of the analog as opposed to the digital, in the sense that everything's been bitmapped and fragmented, and you know, everything's in some kind of chaotic rush to get somewhere, or to be something that it isn't, or we are trying to become someone we are currently not. And to enter into your world of poetry, at least, was to kind of surrender all that guessing and chasing, and sitting in and being in the moment, and discovering the beauty of the moment, and the beauty of the ordinary. And
yeah,
is that something that, again, that you'd been growing towards, or was it some moment when you thought, you know, we're all missing this as poets, let me write it?
No, that wasn't my thought, really. But that's one of the reasons I stopped writing poetry, and that I left the poetry world, in that nobody seemed to be interested in the here, the now, the ordinary, you know, the depth of love inside our hearts, the beauty of being a human being. Everybody wanted to be somewhere else, as a kind of created image of themselves. And particularly in Britain, I don't know, I mean, I think in the US, poetry like this is more acceptable. And, you know, there's kind of, I mean, their poet laureate at the moment is Joy Harjo, for crying out loud. You can't have anybody enter the spiritual more than she does. You know, we had Mary Oliver before her, and Sharon Olds is very, very capable of sort of entering into different situations, literally going back and slapping her parents' faces for being such kind of crazy people when they were young, and so on. And so that's more me. That's this human being, in a way. That's what I value. The ordinary is what I value, not the extraordinary. The sacred is us, not anything else.
I've got your charge sheet here, John, and also on the charge sheet is that as a person of colour, you've not written anything about urban life in Britain or whatever.
No, that's really interesting, isn't it?
I'll send the people with the handcuffs over for you very shortly. Again, in a sense, you were perhaps ahead of a movement that is occurring now in Britain, with this colonial countryside and this reinvention of the countryside, so that so that we have a deeper understanding of the way in which, if you like, people of color have actually been a part of it, and can take a place in it without apology. But it's certainly something that was looked on as askance, you know, as an aberration when you were working in it early on. And have you found a better reception now for this poetry that's set in a more rural environment? By the way, I love how, despite it being rural, there is always something like a beer can floating along. You know, you're never a romantic in the sense of, sort of ignoring the other aspects of life. But yeah, how has that changed over time?
Well, for those of you who don't know, there's a project in the UK called Colonial Countryside, looking at the revealing the true history of historical houses and things like that. What you probably don't know, Peter, is that I was the initial consultant on that project, and helped Dr. Corinne Fowler actually get the funding for that in the first place, but I didn't want to be part of the public side of it. So a lot of that is based on kind of my ideas. I'm kind of involved in a lot of things that you don't know about, that we don't.
I knew about that actually, John.
Did you?
I do remember your involvement early on. I think they started off with like a £5,000 grant. They had basically no money at all.
No,
to do
that's right.
A huge
That's
thing, and
yeah.
we were just giving our time for free, pretty much, to try and get it going. But she's now Professor Fowler, and it's snowballed. It's become a major thing. But thanks very much for your participation in it, on behalf of everyone. But obviously, she'd go to you because you're the one who's been connecting in that way with the countryside for so long.
Yeah, but the thing with that is that in terms of being an artist oneself, I kind of got very tired with as a person of the global majority or a person of color, being at service to colonialism and post-colonialism. The only position that I'm allowed to take is where I write something and then some professor talks about my work in relation to colonial stuff. Why can't I write a love poem? Why can't I write a sci-fi story? Why do I have to reference anything at all? Why can't I be free, man? And and so instead of protesting about it, I just do it. And the thing is, that's why this book will probably only sell in very small numbers, because unless you play the game where they still know how to put you in a box, then if you don't fit in the box, then they think, well, there's nothing here, as it were. So, but I've learned, you see, something I learned again from recital and then from Full Blood and through this period right up to now is that if you're trying something different, you will just be invisible. But then you can either worry about being invisible, right, and say, it's not fair, why can't I have my way and be seen and this? But if you give up the ego of that, you realize that invisibility means you can do anything you want.
This is so true. This is so true.
So just like, the book Invisible Man. So I have done what I wanted to do as an artist instead of trying to fight or serve the machine. Basically, fuck the machine and its construct, and all that it wants us to be.
Absolutely. And
you are your soul, you are the blood in you, you are your person that you are, and you can do what you like, and it's just whether you will do it or not. That's all that it is. So I can't persuade anybody else to do anything, and I cannot change their system, but there can be this little book sitting there that hasn't got any of that in it, that somebody might chance upon one day.
Yeah, when they're open to it. And thanks, John. I've been told by Radhika that we now have to turn and to be open to questions. I think if that's the correct thing. That
more reading, she says.
A few more readings, yeah.
Yeah.
And then we're talking to the
audience. We'll have some poems, and then let's just have like 10 minutes of poems, and then we'll turn it over to you if you want to ask something, questions. So since you talked about gathering, I'll read Gathering.
Okay, and thank you. Radhika's now going to nix me, so it's been nice talking with you. I'll go back into the right-hand side of the screen.
All right, well, bless you, Peter. I love you very much indeed.
I love you too, John. It's been a great journey we've been on.
Peter is the genuine, I'm sorry, I'm going to make him blush. He's genuinely the most lovely, lovely human being. He really is. And I'm so grateful to just have known him for 30 years. I'm also his commissioning editor for a number of pieces on Writer's Mosaic with the Royal Literary Fund. So I have power. Gathering. Outside, Terrace Street smogged in northern strangeness, held in thankful anonymity. In a 1950s front room, a single bulb hardly lights where they gather, forsaking the chairs for the safety of the floor. Like everyone here, young Siddique has been carried on a wave of partition. A passport and a promise of our home is your home, a beginning. The shifting gears of empire's engine, and yet they gather, we, the others, eating home food as best as we can make it, telling stories of meals we would eat if we could. Not a word of Holocaust in this generation of Holocaust. Siddique tells of his mother's smoky bacon and palak, the piles of hot roti she would serve from the earthen oven, the cold dehi made that morning along with the buttermilk, strong flavors of smoke and green chili, hot bread and raw yogurt. The search for spices threads through Siddique's life. That I could reach into this poem from the banks of the Ganga where I walk with the sense of him. Sit him down opposite me one more time and serve him his mother's dishes. Breaking bread with my hands and letting the crumbs fall to the table with the beingness and contentment that is love. We eat every scrap, meeting each other's eyes as men, as the natural movement of life. So, just step through the picture. Just step through the imagination, step through the picture. I'll just pick and choose a little bit here. The Orpheus sequence. So there is one sequence in the book. I promised that I wasn't going to do a sequence, but there is one. I'll read a handful of pieces from the Orpheus sequence. So something that Peter doesn't know is that So was originally going to be a novel. And it was a novel based on the life of Orpheus, as in Orpheus and the underworld and all that sort of thing. And I did vast amounts of research into the Orpheus myth, and I started kind of taking on the identity of Orpheus for a while and walking around as if I was him, having just arrived back from Egypt with all this mystical knowledge and things. And so I allowed that to kind of proliferate into writing, and there was notes for a novel, but then I just started writing poems instead, so it never came to be. And actually the Orpheus sequence tracks the time between 2012 and 2014, where I was living in Germany quite a lot, pretty much in the forest, undergoing this kind of like allowing my soul to break through and letting the old John sort of fall away. So the transformation was kind of occurring in that time. Orpheus as a child. Everything is bright to his eyes. The space is between the connections of life. Each sound is music, whether it is factory thrum or spider web vibration. He loves raindrops falling into puddles, tiny ripples, reflected skies, rocky outcrops and tree silhouettes outlined against the light. The sun reminds him of his father, both powerful and distant simultaneously. He dances in rainstorms, dances with the thunder, loves blue and grey equally without reservation. The loneliest hills surrounding his early life burst with different colors every day as the grasses ripen and die as the sun goes round the earth. The purples of autumn, the gold of winter, the dark black of spring, the rapid confusion of summer. Using his difference to learn about people, landscape and birds, and not quite enough for a life. He keeps his mouth quiet and his heart open. He holds each moment's hand. Daring in friendship and love, though he is told that he is too extreme. He thinks too much, feels too much, speaks too openly, loves too passionately. He spends his days thus and spends his moments like this still, seeing what is real, writing the best words he can, placing them into the music of a line, creating a verse in the song of the life of these times. Last Skies of the Year. And this is a GPS poem. Here in the northern forest, December skies are lit with cold sun. The shadows are long fingers, but their reach is just beginning to shorten as we count a new year. Count our blessings and our curses, Rain is predicted for early afternoon. There are long lines of track through the forest on which you will not meet another person. Long lines of telegraph poles bringing communications to the few houses, the few people who choose to live beyond the city's reach. Overhead, long streaks of cloud billowing white from a child's paintbrush dipped into clean water. Painting. A child's paintbrush dipped into water. The glass jar holds thoughts of what's next. The moment between the selection and the movement of the hand. Wetness of paint on paper. Something outside moves to the inside. Something inside moves outwards. Painting and child emerge together. A flowing pair of lines make a path. White sheep are outlined with black. The river is bright blue. Swifts dart over the waters and the houses. Inside the main house is the idea of the farmer, the child's father. He has a mustached, happy face. The mother is a feeling in another room. It's a clouded sky with mottled hills. The sun will be in the next painting. Rose. The sun is a painting. The child walks home in the afternoon light of late spring or early summer. School bag at his side, heavy but not heavy with reading. He sees the reddest flower in the breathing light, and for a second, a lifetime, air, sun, flower, school bag and boy. Looking closer, he sees the flower is the crushed up Coke can, and life shines in him as he accepts this gift from the God of all things. That's a true story, by the way. I was 9 when that happened. From here, this will be the last poem, I think. Maybe one more after this, from somewhere else. From here, accepting the gifts of the God of all things, I rise with the sun and sleep when she's gone. Every morning keeping a record of a log of days, black ink on cream paper, counting the days, bearing witness. Some days I'm a man on a desert island, counting, finding meaning in the unspoken relationships. On the next street, the dog who barks all day yaps its lack automatically, never winding down. Watering the garden. It's autumn tomorrow. The leaves are heavy, threatening to fall. I go to the coffee shop where I will flirt with the waitress who will bring me toast and coffee. And then let's have one last poem. So that's not the full sequence, but it's most of it. I'll read you the last poem in the book, The Breath Inside the Breath, which is my version. This is my version of a Kabir poem from, I think, the 15th century. And what's really interesting is because this book came out 2 months ago, not quite 2 months ago. This is my non-fiction book, Signposts of the Spiritual Journey. And so it was written or kind of put together at the same time as the writing of this. So to me, they're very, very connected together. And so the last thing in this book is quite close to being the first thing in this book. The same poem is in both books. So literally you kind of move from one to the other. So I don't call them So and Signpost. I call this one number 7 and I call this one number 8. So here's the poem that closes number 7 and opens number 8. There's just like 2 or 3 poems in here, and the rest of it, of course, is a guide to the spiritual journey. The Breath Inside the Breath. I really wasn't very happy with existing versions of this Kabir poem because it had been kind of hippied up in the 60s and kind of made for a particular audience. And I've loved Kabir for as long as I can remember. And so I kind of, when you do a version, it means that you can't do a translation because there was actually no written original version, but there are lots of versions. So you take what you can, and then you bring your poet soul to it and create one of your own that you hope serves the spirit of what Kabir was trying to say. The breath inside the breath. Are you looking for me? I am sitting right next to you. My shoulder is against yours. You will not find me in meditation halls, nor in the mandir, the masjid, the Beit Knesset, or in the cathedral. Not in the words of a mass, nor in mantras or sutras. Not in complicated yoga postures, nor in eating nothing other than rice and vegetables. When you sincerely look for me, you will see me instantly. You will find me with you in the smallest house of time. Tell me, what is God? God is the breath inside the breath. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, John. That was a lovely poem to end your reading on, and yeah, it's one that's well worth reading again and again. Radhika, I'm going to hand over to you in that I believe you may have been coordinating some of the questions, but I think there may be questions in the chat, or there are some comments, or some lovely comments bringing tears. One of them says, of the breath inside the breath. People must intervene soon, else Pete Callan will start interviewing John again.
Yeah, so let me take over here, Radical take over, because Pete and I can talk all day, and we often do, by the way. So if you have anything you'd love to share or ask, then what's our way of doing this, Radhika? Do people just unmute and or raise their hand?
Yeah, sorry, I think I sent some kind of complicated instructions in the chat, but yeah, feel free to raise your hand. There's an option to raise your hand. So, okay, so we've already got one person, but yeah, raise your hand, or yeah, you can just write your question in the chat. So we've got Ellen, who's got the first question. Well, go ahead, Ellen.
Hello, and thank you to each of you and to those of us who are gathered here. My eyes were moist for most of your reading.
Hey, Ellen.
Hi.
Hey, it's lovely to talk to you.
It's lovely to see you.
Ellen and I send each other messages in the background on Instagram. Ellen's so beautiful.
Thank you. For me, I mean, I loved all your explanations of what I've been feeling in your poetry. I feel like you write in essence, you know, and I feel Kabir and some of the other people who wrote in essence. And when you were reading just a moment ago, I said that your essences are beads of haiku loosely gathered like a prayer bead. And that's how I feel you. And I'm just excited to have this book in my hands, and I appreciate your sharing it with us now. And I love your journey of how it came about and how you've lived your life from both sides now.
Yeah. Well, you know, Johnny Mitchell is responsible for that, you know. Where would we be without Johnny? But thank you, Ellen. And that's really beautiful. And it is all about the ordinary, you know. For me, that's all that it's about. I can't do, I don't think there's anything fancy. I think it's just literally, if we want to know whether you want to use the G word or not, I do, but I don't mean it in the old way anymore. I mean it in the old way. You know, all we've got to do is if we allow the feeling of love, if you think about what God would feel like, or the sacred would feel like, it's going to be something like love, belonging, acceptance, intelligence. So if we are intelligent, loving, and belong with each other, then surely that's God, isn't it? You know, that'll do. You know, we just do it through the ordinary, not through the extraordinary. We just start where we are. And all of us are capable of love. All of us have got love in us. So off we go. And so poetry is no different. We just allow that to be in the poetry. As I say, This is not the kind of thing that goes down very well, I don't think, in the UK anymore. They like complication and things kind of referring back to Greek things and all sorts of stuff endlessly, classic stuff and all things. Still that's very prevalent.
John, John, humanity is on the crest of an awakening of some sort. And I feel like your book is the boatman that carries us across.
Well, I hope so. I hope both of them together kind of feel, well, I've been told this. I mean, my publisher, the other publisher, Watkins, have also said, you know, Signposts is exactly the book that's needed right now. I hope they're not just blowing smoke kind of thing. I hope it really is kind of helpful to people and meaningful in kind of carrying us forward in some way. Yeah, but bless you, Ellen. Absolutely lovely to hear from you. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've got on a very technical note, we have some distribution problem with our distributor at the minute, but Peter and Radhika are working on it kind of tirelessly in the background. And so we hope it will be available to people in the US easily before too long. But you can still, apparently you can get it from the Common Word bookstore at the moment, but we hope that the distributor will actually kind of pull their finger out and kind of do their thing. But that's kind of behind the scenes stuff. So we hope soon.
Thank you, Ellen.
Juliet had her hand up.
Yes, Juliet's got a question. Go ahead, Juliet.
Hi, John. Thank you for that reading. I'm curious though about metaphor, and you mentioned you don't want to use, you tried to stay away from metaphor, and I love metaphor and what it brings to poetry. So I just wondered, my question was really around, did you miss it in writing, or did you find you had to struggle, like pull yourself away? Did it come naturally and you to strip it out again? How did that work?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. No, I didn't miss it, and I didn't have to work hard at it at all, because this is kind of I end like a method actor, I suppose, but not an actor, but just like Robert De Niro becomes the role that he is. I've always found that I become the book that I'm writing. So I work I have very funny ways of writing books. So before I even write, for example, one thing that I will do is I'll create like a set of rules for the book as a kind of Bible. And I will even create like a vocabulary sheet of words to use and words not to use. And so I like limitations, you see. I found that if you give me, if you put me in a recording studio with every musical instrument and every piece of software and possibility, I will probably produce nothing. Whereas if you give me 2 wooden spoons, I might begin to tap out a rhythm. So I quite like, just saying, right, for this book, it's 2 wooden spoons, some pots and pans, no metaphors. These words are what we're going to kind of center around, and let's see what we can do with that. It's like creating your palette, basically. And so once I've actually decided on that, and, we're up to 8 books, so including kind of, prose as well now. So, and I've been writing for, I walked into Common Word October 1991, and I was keeping journals since I was 17 and starting to write poems. And then I met Peter, and then Peter introduced me to a guy called Martin Glynn. And between the 3 of us, this sort of moving John forward in his writing kind of started taking place. So it's been going on a very long time. And so I've learned the writer that I am, as it were. And it doesn't mean that I don't need to practice, but because I have to warm up and write things many, many times and edit. But I have that kind of control, So once I've decided on my palette, then that's the palette, basically. But I appreciate metaphor too. And if I do anything else, I could just go straight back to it.
I love that idea, actually. Create your palette, because I agree. Sometimes if we're challenged to write in a form, we'll write obviously something we would never have written otherwise, because we've been given a certain structure, and so we stay within that structure. So there's something around boundaries being helpful. and squeezing creativity in a way that it might not have gone. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like with Full Blood, it's not full of them, but there are, I think, 6 or 7 villanelles in there. But before I did that, I studied the villanelle to a degree that would make somebody else insane. And then felt free to break the rules of what a villanelle is. But until I could actually do a villanelle, there was no way I was going to break the rules of a villanelle. And the villanelle works in a particular way and is a particular kind of container. So it's not that I want to be an expert of villanelle and lord it over other people. It's just that if we want freedom as a writer, it's really worth entering into it. Really enter into the writing with everything that you've got. And we've got a lot. Each of us has got a lot. Whereas if we're busy in the business of wanting to be seen to be a writer, which is what I think most of the literary world is busy doing a lot of the time, and reminding each other that we are writers and we're special, then you don't do the work. You just kind of, you see the same people write the same book over and over again, or the same kind of poem over and over again. That to me would bore me to death.
Yeah, pallets and containers. Thank you. No,
Yeah,
really helpful.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Do we have any other questions?
Diana?
Hi, I'm enjoying this very much. This is really about the first time I've ever connected with you or heard about you, and your poetry is very touching, very touching.
Oh, bless you, Diana. Thank you so much.
I have kind of I have 2 questions, kind of, but the first one, when you talked about how you were at different times, you were 2 completely different souls, and that, and you write about the ordinary, and I think, when something happens, an event, dying could pretty much do it. That is part of the ordinary in a way, that something different that transforms people is probably going to take place in everyone's life. When you started writing again, you used some of your notes and ideas and that from your previous self. Did you have to make did a lot of it seem like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? And you made a lot of changes to it? Or how did your transformation affect your thoughts from before and the thoughts from the future?
That's really interesting. Yeah. I hear what you're saying there, Diana. That's a really good question. So something that I've observed is, well, I would say that it's the same soul, but the kind of the person that we are, we're kind of, because of conditioning and family values and societal values and things like that, the way that we are kind of trained into being a person is that we become a function of the society that we grew up in. So we forget who we actually are. So we are the soul, but then this stuff is all added to us, and then we become the person that we think we are, rather than the soul expressing itself as through person and enjoying that. And I think the process that I went through, which was already happening, but then the death thing was kind of like the end of that, actually kind of restored me back. It was like a kind of reset back to soul in a way. And I had to learn to be this. The words that I used to use, you're absolutely right. I couldn't speak very well for a couple of years after dying because the words that I used to use didn't fit in my mouth anymore. I had to learn to speak in a new way. Because I wasn't angry anymore, for one thing, and I found the access to love much easier. For another thing, and I love the spaces in things, which is, I talk about that so much. But when I actually look back at the older poems, including Full Blood and Recital, something I've noticed both in myself and in other artists, art is often art and writing, literature, music, at the higher end, you know, of them, literature and so on, rather than kind of the popular end, although it can creep through in the popular too. Often is the place where the soul kind of gets to come out and the kind of the conditioning part falls away. And I found that to be true in my writing, in that, so even though the person from before, the John before, was a more limited person and stuck in some ways, when he sat down to write, the kind of person dropped away so that the soul could shine out more. So we're like lanterns of the soul in a way. And then so after 2014, it was like I didn't have to drop anything away anymore. It was more of a wholeness. But the poetry already was kind of coming in that direction. So there wasn't that much to do. Does that make any sense?
That makes a lot of sense. You know how you talked about you have the locations in your book. Have you ever thought of doing one based on the location in the hospital room?
There's not one in there yet, but there could be, couldn't there? You know, there could be one in the hospital room. That's not written about at all in here at all, apart from in the intro. And I talk about it in kind of about 2/3 of the way in Signpost. I tell a short version of the story, as it were, but this is not the book of my life. This is actually a practical guide, as it were. But I thought I'd better talk about it, otherwise, you know, it's like the elephant in the room. But no, I haven't done. But yes, absolutely, I could do that. And it's not that far from Morley Jagran. It was a Sector 6 government hospital, Panchkula in northern India, where I died. And interestingly, I'm 7 years old now. So that was the 19th of December, 2014. So if you can imagine dying, this can perhaps be our closing thought. Imagine your death and what you would give if you knew you were dying and it was your last day. And then suddenly you're back. And here I am, I think I'm something like 2,500 and something days more life than I've had since then, 7 years. So I've actually started having a second birthday on the 19th of December. My birthday is July normally, but now I have a little celebration every 19th of December as well.
So
I'm like the Queen, baby, you know, like the Queen. I need 2 birthdays.
thank you. By the way, can I ask you, have you ever considered having a digital version of any of your books?
Well, there are of some. I mean, Signpost is available digitally. I don't know about plans from Crocus to do a ebook version of Signposts. We will have that conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I think Marilyn is here. I know Marilyn isn't on screen or anything, but Marilyn was my yoga teacher. Hello there.
Oh, you're on mute, Marilyn.
I just want to say hello to Marilyn. I'm so grateful to Marilyn. I did my foundation in yoga with Marilyn, my foundation 1. And every time I do neti, I think of you.
Good.
Good. Marilyn, if you ever need a yoga teacher, right? I'm not joking. I'm not just saying this because she's here. She is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And she's real yoga, big yoga, full yoga, yamas, niyamas, you know, the true spirit of yoga as being rather than this nonsense that yoga has been turned into recently.
It has.
Yeah, it really has. I'm quite outspoken about it, I'm afraid. Meditation and yoga have been absolutely ruined for commercial purposes. Marilyn is the real thing when it comes to yoga. One of the few, actually. I should come back, actually. I need to come back to you.
How lovely to see you.
It's fantastic to see you, Marilyn. Bless you for being here.
It's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to your new books.
Bless you.
Well,
okay.
I think that we may be pushing towards the borders of our, we haven't put enough money in the meter of the Zoom or whatever to keep going
Yeah.
too much longer.
Yeah,
But,
we need to stop now, but shall we just say thank you and good night? Really?
Yeah,
So-
thank you everyone. I've put in the chat details of where you can purchase So. It's available on Culture Word Books, and we can ship to the US, but the postage and packaging will be there as well. So, and it will be on Amazon soon, we hope. And
it is on
John has
Amazon,
another-
amazon.co.uk already. It's just amazon.com, the US
Yeah.
version, that where there's some struggle. So yeah, at the moment, the British supply is no problem. We can ship it over to America. But I don't think it's flown on a plane to America and been stocked in a warehouse in America yet.
Yeah. And yeah, just a couple of things to highlight as well. So John's got another event coming up next week with the Omega Institute. That's on the 26th, and I've popped John's Instagram handle into the chat, so you can find out details of that.
Oh yeah,
talk
can I
next
just say quick something about that? Then we'll so if you feel like that, the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York, is a wonderful kind of almost like conscious college. They have people like, for some reason I'm there, but they have Eckhart Tolle, Pema Chodron, Adi Ashanti, and so on. And they've asked me, because of signposts, one of the directors there has kind of fallen in love with signposts, and kind of so they've invited me to kind of have a conversation. It's free. You can either go through their Facebook page, or it's done as a Zoom as well, which would be the nicer way to do it. That's next Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. UK time. It's just an hour. Wonderful Michael Kraft, who was a friend of Gabrielle Roth's. He's one of the directors there now, and he's going to be interviewing me. But then we're going to turn it over to more spiritual questions, So I'll have to watch my language in that one. They won't take very well to me effing and jeffing.
Fair enough. So,
Yeah.
Radhika, were you wrapping up with the where you can get hold of So, I think?
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, I've put the link in the chat to Culture Word Books, and the Instagram and Twitter for us here at Crocus Books and Culture Word. And if you're interested in more literary events from Crocus Books and Culture Word, then sign up to our newsletter, and I'll put the link on the homepage of our website. There's a space where you can sign up to the newsletter. So yeah, we'd love to see you all again. We've got some events coming up in February as well. So hope to see you there. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. And I hope you enjoyed the evening as much as
The
I
last
did.
word we must give to John now.
Yeah, there we go.
All right. Well, I love you all, and thank you for being here. And we do our best on Zoom and all that sort of thing. It felt really beautiful to me because of you.
Yeah.
Quite honestly, without you, there would have been just me and Peter talking, which would have driven Radhika absolutely crazy. So,
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. It's an honor to receive. Thank you. Let's sign off.
Thank you.